A very good afternoon to all of you. It's great that that we have more than 1,000 students and educators who've joined us for the third and final live session for this year. So over the this is our third year, and each year we are bringing in more students. Our members are bringing in more students to listen to the issues of today. And of course, we have Sunita with us. What are we going to be discussing today? We will be talking about solid waste management. Effectively managing this ever-growing municipal waste is a huge challenge. So Sunita's got this whole presentation, and she's going to be discussing with you. As always, we will go through the presentation first, and then we'll start with the questions. We've got a whole lot of questions already, and we will take in as much as we can. So over to you, Sunita.
Thank you, Ranjita, and again I'm very happy to be with all of you, something I really look forward to. I do believe that this is a very good way that we have started in which we can communicate and stay in touch. It's easier for me, and I think it's also easier for all of you that we don't have to travel and yet we can communicate. So thank you for joining me, and what I'm going to talk about today is solid waste. It's an issue that is in everybody's face. I mean, sometimes I believe, and I say this, and I've written it, that the sign of human civilization, that you're coming close to where human beings live because you can see plastic on the road. I mean, surely there is such an indictment of the way we are that you can say a sign of our civilization is that you can see plastic, dirt, filth, boxes, all sorts of garbage which is on the road, being eaten by animals. It is something which is just should not be something that we should accept. But it is happening, and in spite of all the government effort and good government effort to bring the issue of waste onto our table, the fact is cities are struggling with mountains and mountains of waste. And it's also a fact that as we sweep the mountain, we sweep our waste from our streets, we take it to mountains. So we are creating large landfill sites with massive amount of waste which is then burnt. So instead of, we are just moving the problem from one end to the other. So what can we do? What should we do? And why is this problem of waste becoming so unsurmountable? That is what I wanted to talk about today, and I will look forward to your questions on this. If you allow me, I'm going to try and keep my presentation a little tight so that we have more time for questions and more time for discussion. So I will skip some slides, but I will request Ranjita to put up the presentation so that you can use it, and we can come back to any question that you have in a later interaction. So the first thing that we have is really the question of setting the agenda. And that's been the first question for us. What is the agenda for a garbage-free India? But before we talk about the agenda, the question, to get the agenda and to understand what is the agenda for action, we need to know what is the amount of garbage we produce. And I'm particularly keen that I discuss this with you because I think this is an area of academic study. The fact is, the data on how much garbage we produce is very weak. It's also clear that as we will get richer, the amount of garbage will increase because affluence and waste seems to go together. And the data that we have today tells us that the per capita waste generation, and this data is old, it's 2008 data, this is the last study ever done in India, tells you very clearly that the data is, the amount of garbage that cities generate depend very much on the population of the cities. So as cities get richer, they generate more garbage. And that's understandable because we, middle class, consuming class, have so much more consumable products that we bring into homes that we throw out on a daily basis. And today, with e-commerce taking off, I often wonder, why are we not even having this conversation? When you order from an Amazon, you order from a Flipkart or any other site, look at the amount of waste that comes as a result of it, the packaging material. And this is really what is expected to go up in a very big way. And which is why we have this massive mountain of waste. It's a big issue because our cities are running out of land to dump waste. And today we believe that we have this single bullet answer that we can just burn the waste and it will go away. So governments are trying to set up waste to energy plants, or worse, I go anywhere I go, I see people just burning the waste that is in front of them. And that is really a big issue that we need to think about, because that's not sustainable. When we burn the waste, we add to the pollution in the air. And even if you burn the waste in your waste to energy plants, it has a major impact because of pollution. And that's something we need to think about. But if you look at the data that we have today, it tells you that the total amount of solid waste generated in India is 62 million tons. The waste collected is 43 million tons. Waste that is not collected at all is 19 million tons. But what is treated, and this is what should worry us, that the proportion of the collected waste that is actually treated, recycled, is only 12 million tons. The rest of the waste is just dumped in landfills. So 62 million tons, and the actual amount of waste that is recycled, processed, or treated is only 12 million tons. So I think that's really the crisis that stares us in the face. And the fact is that if you look at the amount of land India needs for landfills, you will realize that it is absolutely not possible. We are a country which has massive population needs. We cannot even provide land for the poor for a housing. And here, if you look at the amount of solid waste we have and the dumping of solid waste, our data shows us very clearly that in the next few years, we will need land of the size of Hyderabad, Chennai, Mumbai, all together, put together, to just be a dumping ground for our waste. So the lesson here is that India is too poor a country to waste. We cannot waste. We have to find a way to use our solid waste to be able to recycle it and reuse it, which then means that you have to segregate the waste. You have to manage your waste so that you can segregate it. But if you look at the last 2 years' status, you will find, and I'll move to the graph, you will see that the collection status has increased when it comes to collection of waste. But as I said earlier, the processing capacity is really not keeping pace. Therefore, we are too poor a country to waste. The agenda for solid waste management, and that's the bottom line, that's the agenda now that I want to talk about, that we have to use waste as a resource. Our country is too poor to use land to dump waste. It is not an option for us. So the central and the core and the key agenda for solid waste management in India has to be that yes, we have to collect the waste, but not to dump it, but to recycle it, to reuse it, because we are too poor a country to waste. So what is the agenda? Agenda 1 is to segregate. Because if you do not segregate, then the entire effort is to dump the waste and to take it into waste to energy plants and to burn it. But that means that, and the experience of the last some years has been that the waste to energy plants, either we build them with such expensive technology that we take care of the emissions, or we make our waste to energy plants so that we can actually make sure that we can segregate the waste and then take it to a waste to energy plant. Because if you look at this slide, you will see that today most waste to energy plants are either closing down or they are now becoming more and more unviable. And the reason is the quality of waste received by plants. And that is, the problem is that we are not creating the right incentive to segregate, because the entire contract for the waste to energy plant is built on how much waste will the municipality or a concessionaire bring to the plant. So their incentive is to bring more and more waste, which means a lot of debris, a lot of stones, unmixed, completely mixed waste is brought to the plant. This means that when they burn it, they are not able to get good energy out of it, they are not able to burn it properly, and that leads to pollution as well. The global experience from waste to energy plants shows us very clearly that either it works if waste is segregated, or it works if the emission standards are extremely stringent and the monitoring systems exist, which means higher cost. We are trying to do all this at a cheaper cost, and this is not going to work. So the other option is to really operationalize segregation, and this to me is the most important agenda. We know there are cities that have done this. Alapi is a city in Kerala which has done phenomenal work to actually segregate at the household level. The state of Kerala has actually promoted the idea of door-to-door, household by household segregation, and has promoted technologies which are decentralized so that households can actually segregate and compost their waste in their own backyards, whether it's a biogas plant or a composting pit. And then the state has found ways in which you can involve recyclers, informal recyclers, to be able to take your non-compostable waste and recycle it. Panjim is another city which has done very interesting work at the city level to be able to segregate waste, to collect segregated waste. The municipality has got ways in which it collects the segregated waste, and then of course they compost it. But the essential lesson here is you need to segregate at source. If any one of us thinks that we don't segregate and somebody else will, it will fail. We have to segregate at home. We have to have a green box for the organic. We have to have a blue box for the paper, the yellow box for plastic, and a black box, or a yellow box for even biodegradable, for incinerable waste. And then of course a black box for all the hazardous waste that we have. We have to segregate. The better we segregate, if we take the bottle separately, the plastic separately, the paper separately, as we used to in every household, that is the only way that waste management will work. But the other part of it is that we have to get our government, our city governments, to adopt this as well. Because if you and I segregate, but the man who comes to collect our waste and mixes it, what's the point? And that means that cities have to find a new way in which they manage their waste. What we are suggesting is that today it is convenient for a city to go and dump its waste in a landfill. Make that very expensive. Put a tax on the landfill. Say that if any waste goes to the landfill, you're going to have to pay the price of the land and many times more, because you are wasting that land forever. If you put a tax on the landfill, there will be every incentive so that the city will actually manage its waste in a way that it will collect the recyclable waste, it will collect the compostable waste, and it will also set up centers in which that waste can be composted or will work with recyclers so that the waste can be recycled. So we need to learn from the global experience that landfills are not the solution, and we need to change the law so that we can make this possible. The third agenda is that we need to recognize the informal sector. The fact is, we have not completely drowned in our garbage because the poor today collect it and then process it. But we never recognize their contribution. We don't even measure their contribution. And certainly we do not promote it or reward it in municipal laws. So the question is, how can we work with this massive and well-organized informal waste collection and processing system without formalizing it and destroying it? And that's really the challenge that we need to do. So CSC does a rating of cities. We actually look at how a city does in collection, in transport, but our most important work is to look at how they do reuse and how little waste goes to the landfill. The first time when we did the cities, this is what we found. We are hoping that we can actually promote this. We can give cities a greater incentive and a greater reputation for doing waste management in which they both minimize it, but most importantly, they don't transfer the problem from one to the other. And that is going to be the agenda for us. So that's where we are hoping that even your colleges, your localities can be part of this agenda. And finally, I want to make the point that it's important for us to recognize that we middle class Indians, we have always treated the house of the poor as our landfill site. Today, landfills of our cities are set up in where the poor of our cities live. And therefore, what we have always done is that we have thrown out our garbage, the municipality has collected it and taken it to where the poor live. But today, when the poor are getting more and more politically aware, and that is good, they are beginning to say, not in my backyard. It's happening in Kerala, it's happening in Pune, it's happening in Bangalore, it's happening in Delhi. In all our cities, people are fighting against that next landfill site because they are saying, not in my backyard. No longer can you set up a waste incinerator that pollutes in my backyard. You can't set up a landfill site in my backyard. This is good. We should not protest against this. This is good because if we celebrate this, then we will learn that every backyard is somebody's front yard. And we will learn to do waste management differently. We will turn the waste into a resource because we will learn, we will know that we cannot use and throw, but we have to use and use and use once again. And this will change the paradigm of waste management. So let's celebrate NIMBY, not in my backyard. And let's make every backyard, let's understand every backyard is somebody's front yard. And that's when we will do waste management differently. So thank you very much for listening to me.